Hi there. Welcome to our webinar all about PACT, which is the Permanency and Adoption Competency Training of the Adoption Council of Ontario. We're going to go through a webinar today to talk to you about our adoption and permanency educational opportunities. My name is Kathy Soden, and Sylvia Gibbons and I will be your facilitators for this webinar. We will make the slides available on the webpage so that you can access those as well after you've listened to the webinar or before, or you could pause now and download the slides and use them at the same time as you listen to the webinar. In terms of other webinars that we do, they are listed in chronological order on our events page at adoption.on.ca/events. And for information about each of the individual webinars, you can go to our webinar page, which is at adoption.on.ca/adoption-matters. And you can find out information on each of them. Okay, so let's get started. To introduce ourselves, my name is Kathy Soden. I'm the manager of the PACT program at the ACO. And you're going to find out that we do lots of training for both families, for parents and caregivers, professionals, as well as all those touched by adoption. I'm also an adoptive mom, so all of this educational piece is very near and dear to my heart. These sessions that we offer are terrific, but I'd be the first to tell you that it's really my kids who've probably taught me the most about adoption and permanency journeys. Sylvia, would you mind introducing yourself?
Great, thank you very much, Kathy, and welcome everyone. As Kathy said, my name is Sylvia Gibbons, and I also work in the PACT department. I am the parent liaison for the ACO. In my role, I'm also a trainer, and I help parents build support groups in communities after we finish some of our training, and I also do some peer support. And just like Kathy, what brings me to this work is I'm an adoptive parent of 3 amazing kids who, just like Kathy, have taught me. I often say that they raised me, I didn't raise them. So I'm very proud of the work we do in the PACT department, and this certainly would have been very helpful when I first started on my adoption journey. So welcome everybody and enjoy.
Great, thanks, Sylvia. Okay, so this is the agenda for this particular webinar. It will probably be about a 1-hour webinar. We do have a video included in it, so it's probably going to take about 60 minutes to go through the webinar. So we're going to give you a little bit of background to PACT and why it has been established at the ACO. And going through that, we're going to talk about the way our families saw things back a few years ago and what they told us that they needed, as well as what professionals told us that was needed. And just talk a little bit about what our vision is for our families and professionals in the province. Then we're going to talk about the core beliefs of the educational programs that we offer, and then spend quite a bit of time talking about our 2 key curriculums, which are Pathways for Parents and ACT for Professionals. We're also going to talk a little bit about the fact that we are broadening our audience to all Constellation members. So those include people touched by adoption, whether they are adoptive parents or other permanency parents, caregivers, adoptees, children, kids, as well as adults. And first families, first and original families, are all what we call Constellation members. And over time, we are building an education programming for all Constellation members. And then we're going to talk about other educational opportunities. So we'll start with the background to the PACT project. So we did about 5-6 years ago, we really took the time to look at some strategic planning. And one of the things that was recognized that we probably needed to do more of was education. And so we surveyed our families and professionals in 2012, and we asked them what their needs were, what their kids' needs were, what their needs were. And in 2 short weeks, we got a response of almost 500 families telling us what their needs were. And we also got great response from almost 50 professionals in the province involved in the adoption world talking about the same thing. And the needs were great. There really was no doubt that people were feeling isolated and that people needed a lot more assistance in terms of understanding what was going on for their kids and getting support for what was going on for their kids. Help specifically wanted for a better understanding of the mental health needs of their children and youth. From that, we did some more research. We looked at what was going on in the States, what was going on in the UK, and we also sat down with professionals across 4 regions in the province and had roundtables over a period of about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And there were 75 different professionals involved in that. And we were just talking to them about the needs of our families. And at the time, there was a lot of research being done out of the Donaldson Institute in the States, talking about how important it was for the success of adoption and permanency that people be well prepared, but that they also be well supported after they adopted. So the importance of post-adoption supports and the huge importance of having professionals involved that understood adoption and permanency journeys. And so those reports are still available if you're interested to have a look at. But those were all the things that kind of helped us in our understanding of what was needed and what our next steps were. We came to the conclusion, and we believe this to this day, that adoption and permanency really is a specialized field. Professionals, like professionals that specialize in certain fields, professionals in this field need specialized training because this is specialty work. And when you're parenting kids who've experienced trauma and loss in their lives, it really calls for specialized parenting. Traditional parenting, like many of us were raised, really doesn't address the needs that our kids have. And so this is kind of the framework that we arrived at in trying to figure out what to do next. So this is a graph that or a graphic, I guess, that we put together at the time to try to demonstrate what was going on as we talked to people. And so if you look at this, the little red circles are families. Families kind of out there, pretty much at that stage, kind of alone, feeling isolated, that once they had finalized their adoption or permanency, that they were wished well and they were kind of on their own to figure out what to do. And so, whether that was coming through a private adoption, an international adoption, or children through the child welfare system. So sorry, on the left, we've got, people thinking about adopting. We have a course called the How to Adopt. People take home studies, do a home study and take the PRIDE training, and then they are matched with children who need families through these various systems. And then the families are kind of out there on their own, and to some extent kind of bouncing around a little bit, obviously dealing with the educational system, where we do find that our family's stress level can increase when we're in the educational system, as most of us are one way or another, that when we are dealing with the mental health system, family stress can increase as well if we're not talking to people who understand the dynamics involved in permanency families. Some of our families do come into contact with the justice system because our kids sometimes do things that, kind of contravene the laws that we have. And when we understand kind of trauma better and some of those survival skills that our kids had to develop, we can better understand why sometimes we end up having to deal with the justice system when our kids come in conflict with the law. And because so many of our families struggle with lots of issues, it becomes challenging. And sometimes, sadly, disruptions in permanency families do disrupt, and kids end up back in the child welfare system. And so when that happens, that increases the risk that kids may age out of the child welfare system. And then the outcomes when that happens are not terrific. So this is kind of how families were feeling at the time when we did our survey work and our research. So what we did is we kind of took all that information to figure out what do they need. And this is what they told us that they needed. And it's a combination of things. They wanted more specialized education. They wanted to understand better what was going on with their kids. They knew they needed more specialized professional support because many families that were asking for help, kind of the people that got to that stage of reaching out, weren't always getting helpful advice and weren't always finding that the advice given was making a positive difference. Sometimes our families need respite and peer support. Other times they really would have liked better web-based navigation so that they understood, okay, if this is happening to me, what do I do next? And they need advocates. They need advocates kind of across the systems that they're involved with. There was also a recognition of the power of having youth networks and groups and supports for youth, that when youth can meet other youth that are on these journeys, it can make a world of difference in finding a group of friends who get it, just simply get it, and they don't have to explain a whole bunch of things to them. That it's really quite a powerful kind of tool, if you will, in helping our kids along these journeys. And the other thing, of course, is subsidies and financial support based on the needs of our kids. So we had kind of families in the middle, and this is what they're saying they need around them to buffer them. So then we came up with this vision, and what we wanted to see was that families didn't feel so isolated and they got the help that they needed. And by bringing families together through what became our Pathways training program, which we're going to talk about, they would meet one another in their communities, and they would take this course together and bond and learn a lot together, learn a language and a framework to understand their journeys better. And they would continue to stay together if they wanted to, so that they could continue to support each other. And so we would, instead of having families kind of isolated all out there on their own, we would have family groups brought together where that they could take support from each other, learn from each other, and be there for each other. And around the families, and through a parent liaison support like Sylvia's, things could develop from those parent support groups, like youth networks, like respite networks. Some great advocacy could happen, as well as getting some local community support to help these foster, and having additional supports as well from clinical support when possible, as well as parent associations like Adopt for Life to help support these groups as well. So buffering all of this, though, we really did recognize that the mental health system, the education system, the justice system, and the child welfare system, as well as international adoption agencies and private adoption practitioners, all needed to understand these journeys better. And so that this ACT or professional training was also going to be needed. So this was our vision at the time and our thinking, that this is what could really make a difference for our families. So thankfully, we were able at the time to get some funding. We were able to get funding from the Ontario Trillium Foundation that helped us examine a number of curriculums and gave us the time to figure out, should we develop our own curriculums? And through that work, we did identify a curriculum that we thought was terrific for professionals, and it happened to have a sister curriculum as well for families. And so the Zuckerman Family Foundation stepped forward and was able to provide the funding so that we could bring both curriculums to Ontario at the same time. And so that we were able to do in 2015. And so our two key curriculums are called, for parents, it's Pathways to Permanence 2, Parenting Children Who Have Experienced Trauma and Loss, and that's our little flyer for it. And for professionals, it's called ACT, an Adoption and Permanency Curriculum for Child Welfare and Mental Health Professionals. And those are our two key curriculums. And it was the Kinship Center in California that developed these curriculums. And Kinship is a member of the Seneca family of agencies. They had developed these over many years, working with a lot of families. It's the main developers were Sharon Rosia and Deborah Silverstein. They developed those curriculums And they share a set of core beliefs and a framework that include the 7 core issues of adoption and permanency: attachment, trauma, grief, loss, and neurobiology. And at the time we thought, you know, there are courses out there for some of these individual pieces, but this was a curriculum that beautifully brought these all together and weaved them through in a way that was understandable and accessible to families, and in a way that was understandable and accessible for professionals. And so these curriculums we learned about, spent some time talking to kinship and the people there, and we found that they were absolutely wonderful partners on this, very much on the same page that, that we were in terms of how we wanted to help families in Ontario. So as part of this, we also reached out to hire some really skilled trainers from across Ontario. And these are people that not only had skill in either child welfare, mental health, but there were also people who had skill in training. And we dedicated a part of our interview to trying to figure out who really had a heart and a passion for families and really wanted to try to make a difference. And so our roster of trainers is a phenomenal group of people. And Sylvia is one of them, actually. So there you go. So I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia now, who is going to talk about the underlying beliefs of both curriculums.
Thank you, Kathy. And so just as Kathy said earlier, you know, why we really like the curriculums, or why the ACO liked it, is because of that shared framework and the core beliefs. And this really is what the curriculums are, both the ACT and the pathways are based on. And here they are here, like permanence in a family really is the center of all work in child welfare. That's an underlying belief that is paramount to both of the trainings. And every child deserves a family. And I mean, our motto is at the ACO is that kids need families and families need support. So again, this really works, tied in well with what we were trying to do. Children must have permanency to achieve their full potential. Again, I mean, a strong belief that we shared, and that comes across in the curriculums, both of them. Emotionally, physically, and developmentally challenged children also merit an opportunity to experience the love of a permanent family. And especially so to get them into those permanent homes as soon as we can, so the healing can actually start for our kids. And children and youth need families for a lifetime and not just for childhood. So we really help families to understand that, and the professionals, that it is intended for a lifetime, and it's not just till they turn 18, but everybody, as most of us still do, need our families. And then healthy, functional families provide that stable, healing environment for kids that may have been traumatized and abused. And so again, just speaking to what I said earlier, that it's important to get our kids into those permanent homes as soon as possible so the healing can start. And it just ties in, again, beautifully with the curriculum of both, for the professionals and the parents to be able to understand that. Okay, Kathy, I think we can go to the next page. Keeping children's previous, you know, the positive, those connections that help, and deepen the attachment to the new caregivers is really important for the families to understand again, and recognizing that kids, you know, that because of their histories, that they have developed some serious emotional and behavior problems as a result of their pre-placement history, that we needed those skilled interventions to help with that, that adjustment, that transition that can be really hard, especially to a new family, and to help those families through a broad array of essential services. So we really help parents to with the curriculum, to dig deep, to just, it's not just seeing the behavior, but actually trying to decode the behavior. And we spend a lot of time on it, and helping parents to get that. Also, another core belief is that adoption, foster care, and the kinship, relative caregiving, and customary care really involve some complex issues that require specialized training for caregivers and for the professionals who serve them. And so we start talking right off the bat in helping parents to do that shift between a traditional parent and that more therapeutic parenting. And then children and their families must receive interventions that are culturally competent and built on family system models. And so again, very important for us that this was one of the core beliefs, because we're looking at the whole child, the whole family, and recognizing that their culture is a huge part of who we are, and how do we continue that and help our families who may be of a different culture. So the Pathways curriculum, as Kathy said, it was delivered by the Kinship Center, and often people will say, well, what is Pathways to Permanence 2? Or I can't take it because I haven't taken the Pathways to Permanence 1. And the Pathways to Permanence 1 is the equivalent to our PRIDE training here. So it is really meant for those pre-adoptive, those pre-permanent families, that training. Where the Pathways to 2 is you have to have the child placed with you in order to take this training, because what you're going to be learning in the class and what you're going to be looking from others, you'll be able to apply at home. And what you're seeing at home, you'll be able to bring back to the class and to work out together, which is often hard, because when you're in that pre-placement stage, it's very hard to comprehend what life might be like. So the Pathways 2 is just for families that already have the children in their home, because it makes it real. It's the real life experience. When the ACO bought the curriculum, there was 7 sessions, and they are 3 hours each. And I'm going to talk a little bit more how the ACO added an 8th session. But each session is 3 hours, and it is it's a full curriculum. The 3 hours do go fast, but they are full. They're very interactive. We use videos, we use different medias. There are some group exercises. There is homework each week, and a lot of the homework is based on your own reflections as well too, and it gives you time to what you've learned to kind of think about and then come back to again. So while we really encourage people to do the homework, because it is, again, it's just going to help you with your parenting. And then, as I talked about before, this is, this is a big part of the training, as was with the core beliefs, is understanding and being able to decode your child's behaviors. What is that behavior telling us? And we really want parents to dig deeper and not just see the behavior, but we really want them to try and figure out what is it that our kids are telling us, because often our kids don't have the words to tell us how they're feeling or what's going on, and it's going to come out in behaviors, as Kathy and I well know as an adoptive parent. And so it's really important that we try to decode that behavior so we can help meet the needs for our kids. And then understanding how we, as the parent, as the caregiver, respond to those behaviors that we see, because that's going to have a huge impact on our relationships with our kids, and understanding that we don't want to just, we're responding to our kids as opposed to reacting. So we really help our parents understand that, because actually when you are responding to your child's behavior, you're taking some time to think about it and remembering that with our kids with trauma and loss histories, that connection is going to be at front and center for kids. So before we can correct some of that behavior, we want to be able to connect with them. And so that's, a lot on what we talk about throughout each of the sessions. This is a list of the sessions. So session 1 is, parenting children with extra needs. So we talk here about, it's our first class, so we're really trying to bring people together and understand where we're all coming from. We talk about our core beliefs, because again, that's the basis of our training. We do talk about, different types of families. We talk about some of the myths, some of the stereotypes, and then again, we also look at openness. And then our first session, the homework in this one, is really self-care. What do you do to take care of yourself? Because we recognize that this is hard work. I mean, I always say parenting is really tough. I think parenting kids that are coming from trauma and loss is exceptionally harder. And so we really want parents to be able to start taking care of themselves and looking at what is it you do to take care of yourself so you can be there to meet the needs of our kids. And then session 2 is those lifelong issues in permanence. And that's where we start to introduce the core issues in adoption, not just for the child or the youth, but we're also looking at the parent, the caregiver, and then we're looking at those first families as well too, and realizing that, you know, those core issues, we always talk about adoption, permanence is a lifelong journey, and so we start building on it here and looking at it. And then session 3 is childhood development. So we look at what typical childhood development looks like. We introduce the concept of developmental buckets, and we help parents to understand that, you know, you may have a 7-year-old child in your home, but because of trauma and loss that they've incurred, that they developmentally, they might be at a 3-year-old level. So how to parent to that child when their developmental level is different from their chronological age, and how do we help the child to catch up. So here, like I said, we introduce the buckets, and we start with the concept with the parents to parenting to their stage versus age. In session 4, we look at creating those positive attachments. Part 1, we realize that as attachment is a huge part and a huge in the adoption permanency journey, that it has 2 sessions. And session 5, we build on what we've learned in session 1, and we start to look at the brain, and we look at the science behind it. And then again, throughout these sessions, and I believe it's actually in session 3, we start with some decoding. So we're having the parents starting to think about already, how do we decode some of the behavior that we're seeing? And as we progress in each session, we're building on it. So with the 7 sessions, every session is built to the next one. So we'll start with one and we continue building on it right through. So it's really important that when parents take the training, that they're able to attend all of the sessions, because when you miss one, you miss a large part of the curriculum. Session 6 is parenting the child of abuse and neglect. And again, we look at how that impacts our kids, our children, our youth, how it impacts that internal working model, the core of who they are, and why, you know, no matter what we may do or we say to our kids, you know, you're in a safe, loving home now, it's really understanding how they view themselves, how they view caregivers, and how they view the world around them, and how we, you know, by being that healing, therapeutic parent, that we actually are able to help change that script for our kids as well. And then session 7, we talk about parenting the child with drug and alcohol exposure, what that looks like, and then what are some of the things we can do with that child. We do have a video to show that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, where in Texas, they did some interventions. They looked at some interventions, and pre-finalization, they chose this pathways curriculum. And so they came up with this really great video that we're going to play now, just to kind of give you, I mean, I've talked about pathways, but it's really nice to have the video for you to see for yourself, kind of what it's like, and then to hear some of the families, what they've said after the training. So Kathy, if you're ready to roll, that'd be great.
Children from hard places need parents who feel equipped to help them heal and grow no matter what. That takes preparation, education, support, and the services families need when they need them. In partnership with 8 sites, the National Quality Improvement Center for Adoption and Guardianship Support and Preservation tested promising practices and evidence-based models of support and intervention along a continuum. 8 interventions in 5 intervals, each focusing on a different level of risk. Together, the intervals represent the needs a family may encounter along the lifelong journey of adoption or guardianship. Texas selected focused services for its intervention. Introducing Pathways to Permanence 2, parenting children who have experienced trauma and loss. This is Texas, the Lone Star State, where adoption professionals and the families they serve have discovered a new pathway to forever.
Our intervention in Texas is Pathways to Permanence to Parenting Children Who've Experienced Trauma and Loss. It is a 7-session course for caregivers who are actively parenting children that are moving towards adoption and/or guardianship. We are in the focused service interval, which is the pre-finalization phase.
Focused services are intended to address the emotional, behavioral, and mental health needs of children, and to prepare families to meet the needs of the children both pre- and post-permanence.
We were looking for something progressive and something that would allow someone to feel empowered to move forward towards finalization and adoption. We went through a very extensive process. We had an intervention selection team that we used.
We met as a team. It was my staff, it was stakeholders, it was part of the QIC team. We really went through a theory of change to define what we wanted to work on and what barriers did we see.
It all coming back to trauma, grief, and loss. What we found was that we needed to be better at preparing families in dealing with trauma, grief, and loss. And that to effectuate change, we needed an intervention that could support them through that process.
Pathways to Permanence 2 was really the best fit because it focused on trauma, grief, and loss. It focused on not making the behaviors and emotional needs of our children their fault. It focused more on equipping the families.
This is an intervention that the state really is excited about, and they wanted it purposely for this population.
We're basically trying to figure out if the intervention Pathways to Permanence 2 increases the likelihood that we can move kids out of foster care and into permanent home.
Pathways to Permanence 2 comes from California, from Kinship Center. They're the ones who developed it. They've provided extensive technical assistance. They came to Texas and trained our facilitators.
Because I put Attachment 101 into my presentation.
Traditional parenting depends on attachment and relationships. And children who've experienced trauma and loss are usually not terribly trusting of adults and have a difficult time establishing new relationships, and certainly have a difficult time establishing attachment. So what we're trying to do is help parents modify their parenting so that they're really getting attuned to what the child's needs are and not reacting to the behaviors.
In the summer of 2015, my then 14-year-old granddaughter made an outcry of sexual abuse. And as part of that, she and her 2 younger siblings were removed from their home by CPS and placed with me. It turned my world upside down, and it turned those 3 kids' world upside down.
Monty's daughter, the mother of her grandchildren, stood by the abuser.
But I was really struggling because of the trauma that was going on with the family. Things weren't normal anymore. Things were not like they used to be. These kids were traumatized. They'd been through horrible things. You can't just love this away for them.
Monty was among the families invited to participate in the Pathways to Permanence 2 trial.
So I see a letter and I'm thinking, oh man, what are they going to want me to do now? But as I looked at it and started reading about it, it caught my eye immediately. I knew there had to be some better way to deal with the children than the way I was trying to raise them like I raised my kids back in the 70s. It doesn't work. So I was open to more information. I knew I needed something that worked. And I was hopeful from the beginning that this class would offer that to me, and it did.
Robert and Sandy Coy built their family through adoption. First came Andrew, adopted 10 years ago at 12. Next, Lily and Noah, a sister and brother adopted at 8 and 10. And the newest family members, another sibling group, Marcus, 9, and Samuel, 7.
We had it all wrong, honestly. And we thought, I'm going to go into this adoption, this kid is going to be so grateful because they just want a family and we want a kid. We adopted Andrew. He was our first adoption. He was 12 years old. He did not like moms. Everything that I did was wrong. everything.
Better one than mine.
7 years later, the Coys became foster parents to Lily and Noah, with the intention to once again adopt.
First week that we got Lily and Noah, and they were placed in our home. About 3 days later, it was Robert's birthday. We were swimming and barbecue, we were having fun. That was the first time we met the other side of Lily.
So in a time span of 5 years, these kids had moved to 10 different placements. Not always together. When I received the case, the kids weren't together. For various reasons. If you go back and look why all the placements changed, it says because of child behavior. The caregivers no longer wanted the children in the home for whatever reason.
She screamed and screamed and screamed, and then that is when we found out that she could make her nose bleed on demand. So there was this screaming child with blood running down her face, screaming, "You're hurting me," and we were nowhere near her. We weren't prepared for that.
You could see that they were really sweet kids, but they did have, just these deep layers of trauma, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And what I was finding was these caregivers didn't know how to deal with it either.
I used to cry. A lot, and I would say to Robert when we were away from the kids, I don't know if I can do this. And it broke my heart because I did not want to be one of those parents that returned a child. I didn't want to be that. But it crossed our minds.
I was scared. I was scared of failing these children.
But right about when we were going through, oh my gosh, did we bite off more than we can chew? Are we the right parents for these kids? Is when the Pathways to Permanence class came in.
A lot of our parents coming in that are just at the end of their rope. They're not enjoying their kids. They love their kids, but they can't enjoy them, and they're too exhausted to do anything else.
I was a little apprehensive at first. I didn't really know what to expect, but I was desperate for knowledge, and I've always found out that information helps. One of the first things that the facilitators told us is that they're going to give us some tools that we can use to deal with kids who've been traumatized. And I'm like, tools? I need those. I've got kids who've been traumatized. I'm in the right place.
I received a letter in the mail from my caseworker saying, here's a class, Pathways to Permanence. And I looked at it, I scanned it over, and I just kind of put it off to the side because I didn't want to take another class. What made me take interest in it is when my caseworker said to me, I need you to trust me. Please give it a shot. I went into that first class, and an hour into it, I think it was a 3-hour class, I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, wow. The biggest takeaway that I had from that class was the 10 things I need from you every day. From the child's perspective, I need you to listen to me. I need to be touched every day so that I know that you have affection for me. I need to be claimed by you. Let me see. And who are you?
For you to gain a child, there was a loss somewhere.
One of my favorite parts of the curriculum is the 7 core issues. It shows loss as the hub of the adoption experience, which gives families a really deep understanding of where kids' behavior is coming from a lens of loss.
Another big component of the curriculum is what we call developmental buckets. So we have 5 buckets that represent developmental stages.
And it's our job as parents to fill these buckets with sensory-rich experiences. What do I mean by sensory-rich experiences?
It was sort of fascinating to me to try to come up with ways to, well, how can I fill these buckets? What can I do?
So I like session 3. I love when we go over the stages of development and what you should expect at each stage of development.
That really brings things home to the participants to see, oh, they're acting like a 5-year-old. Let me parent to that 5-year-old that didn't get what they needed at that stage of development.
Parent to the stage, not the age.
Yeah. I liked session 4 that talks about some of the science behind it, the limbic system, the emotional responses, and you just kind of do your hand models of the brain where I flipped my lid and I'm back to my thinking brain.
Session 5. By 5, and we're now talking about really creating those positive attachments and the things that we're going to really reinforce in the home. I start seeing more of the aha.
And then they also talked about the birth parent conversation. and which was something that Rob and I had stayed and shied away from during our first adoption. We felt like it would bring up bad things if we talked about the birth parents, so we never did.
You know, we thought we were protecting them by not giving them all the information. And it's not.
This class was telling me, you know, you need to talk about it, and you need to be real honest, and you need to tell the kids the truth. So that is exactly what we did.
That's part of what creates their whole sense of self, and that's what lets them grieve the losses, and that's how they put together the pieces of the puzzle.
That was our turning point. That was our breakthrough moment with our kids, because they suddenly felt safe, and we were talking about something that nobody else would talk to them about.
One of the things that impressed me greatly is what I learned from the other participants.
Devastated.
We learned from each other. Sometimes we consoled each other. I was feeling pretty alone in my world. No one else that I know, none of my friends had ever been through anything like this. So it was really helpful to be around other people who were dealing with similar things. The facilitators encouraged the participants to share and to be vulnerable and to open up. I mean, some of the things that we discussed were hard to discuss.
So tell me, what was the key points from this exercise? What did you guys take from it?
It made me realize for the first time what my granddaughters lost. They lost everything. It didn't really dawn on me they'd lost all of those relationships. And we also lost our grandparent-granddaughter relationship. I'm not the fun granny anymore.
And they were always good at taking it and wrapping it into the curriculum so that we could see, oh, this is how this fits, and this is where we're going next. So they were really good at giving us that roadmap.
One of the key things is the idea of the homework that's given to parents. The homework we give them is tied directly to their relationship with their child and their child's behavior. And then they come back and we talk about how did that work for you and what was it like? And you know, what were the powerful experiences that folks had, and they share those. These homework assignments really get them to stop and think and to break patterns.
It's not always easy to do in the heat of battle or when people are upset. When you've got a screaming teenager, sometimes it's hard to fall back and think, okay, let's see, I need to decrease her stress, increase her pleasure. How can I do that in this moment? But at least those things were on my mind.
One of the blessings for us was we could go home, and when Lily or Noah would say something to me, I knew.
It was fresh.
Yeah, it was fresh in my mind. And it was fresh in his, because I would come home immediately after class and go over the entire lesson as I remembered it. And because their behaviors were so immediate to change, it just made us more excited every week. Okay, what are we going to learn?
When parents take something home, try it, and bring it back, and they have success or they have a change, it encourages them to feel like things can get better.
It kind of helped our relationship too. We became a stronger couple, a more relaxed couple. And a closer family.
Everything started changing. Lily stopped having tantrums. Noah was not as aggressive. We weren't stressed out anymore. It wasn't a high stress situation. We were laughing more, and you know, there's a domino effect.
Push that. Harder. Let's see if the chicken's roll.
Yeah. It felt genuine. I was being the mom that I had always imagined that I would be.
I think we were about 3 or 4 sessions in when something happened with Morgan. She had a wreck. She had snuck out in the night and wrecked her car. And I thought she was upstairs asleep, and I get a call from her, and she's crying and upset. Granny, don't hate me, don't hate me. What, where are you? She was in an ambulance. She couldn't tell me where she was. She says, I need you to come hold me. And I said, I'm on my way. But I knew then that the push away was, I'm gonna go do something I know I'm not supposed to do. I'm my own person, and you can't really control me. I'm gonna go do something bad. But on the other hand, I've messed up, something horrible's happening, and I need you now. I don't want you to be upset with me. I need you to come hold me. That's what they were talking about. That's exactly what they were trying to tell us about the attachment. It comes and it goes. Sometimes things will be going along just fine, and next thing you know, there's a crisis, and that's exactly what happened that day.
We end our sessions with one word that you got out of the whole 7 sessions, and I get a lot of hopefuls.
Hopeful's how I pretty much sum up how I feel leaving the class.
Families use words like empowered, hopeful, grateful, educated, able to.
All right, what was the highlight of your day?
To describe their experience with this. It is extremely powerful for them in what it's changing, and we are excited to bring it to them.
They will even tell you, I'm going to adopt kids when I get older. I can't wait to see how big our family tree grows.
Great, thank you, Kathy. I mean, I just think that video just talks beautifully about what the Pathways program is. And I tell parents and caregivers all the time, it does not matter where you are in this journey. You will still learn something. And I give the example of myself, who had been parenting for 15 years when I first sat in a training for Pathways, and the light bulbs that were going off for me we're just like, oh wow, I get it now. And a couple of the comments that were made in there were the parents said, and I think a lot of us feel this way, even though we take the pride and we've learned that love, we can love them away, like, that this is going to be better because we'll show them what love is like and they'll be fine. And that about traditional parenting, because for us, we quickly saw when our kids moved in that the way we had been parented was not going to work for our kids. So we too were at a loss to try to figure out what was going to work, but we knew the traditional wasn't. And when we took the Pathways, or I took the Pathways, that was it. It was, I needed to be this healing parent where that connection was foremost. So connecting before correcting, and then understanding to parent to where they are at their stage and not their age. So very important messages. I love that video. And as I talked about just a little bit earlier, where we, the ACO, added an 8th session. So we really didn't want, after the 7 sessions, the parents all sitting together now, and for the first time meeting many parents that were parenting the same way as them. We wanted to somehow keep that connection alive. So we developed session 8 with how do we keep these families together and building some kind of community network for them. So at the end of session 8, and I do pretty well all the session 8s, I go and I speak to the group and I talk about the benefits of support groups, because I know myself how it helped me as a parent when I was struggling to find other people that were like me, where I felt so overwhelmed and isolated, and being able to keep everything that you've learned in the Pathways alive for you. And so I talked to them about session, what they want to do, what is it they want to do, and how can I help them move forward. So that's my main role at the ACO, is to work with parents to establish these community-based support groups, and then to find out what resources there are in, not just in their community, but in the province. And then we, over the sessions, we collect that and then we send it out to them. And so my role then is to always give them support, to be there for them, to help them any way we can. And we do some leadership training for them. And we also have calls where they're able to meet other of the parent leads across the province, so they don't feel isolated as well. And they learn from each other what's working in other areas, how are they meeting. And so session 8, while I deliver it, it really is about the group to see what is it they would like to do moving forward. And then to sum it all up is that we really hope through the ACO, by doing the Pathways program, that, we really want our parents to have the support, to have tools and hope I'm not here without hope. And so we hope to give that to our parents as well. And so we piloted the pathways here in Ontario with the Jewish Family Children's Aid Society in Toronto in fall of 2015. And then in 2016, January, we rolled it out provincially across the province. So to date, we have offered over 90 offerings of our pathways in over 40 different Ontario communities, covering all 5 regions of the province, and we've also been doing virtual now. And so far, we have over 1,200 parents that have been trained through the Pathways program, which is amazing. And the hope that we bring to parents and that they're telling us they've gotten afterwards. And so the ministry does fund this for the permanent families, for the adoptive, the kinship, the customary care, or the foster to adopt. So all those families that are the permanent families for our children and youth. That is post-adoption family support group that we have here. There's absolutely no cost to parents. And when we meet in person, that we do provide childcare for children age 3 and up. And we also provide a meal, because what we really want to do right off session 1 is start to build a community for families. As I said earlier, there's many families that don't even know other people that have been parenting on a permanence journey. And so we really want from day 1 to start building a community. So we start with the meal, and do our sessions that way. And then, as I said earlier, that the only stipulation to people coming is that they have to have the child placed with them to take the pathways, because it just makes it real, and they can take what's happening at home and bring it to the class. And again, what's happening in class, what they're learning, that they can take home. And often you'll hear families coming back and they'll say, okay, I tried what you said and it worked. And so it's really important that, you know, that you do have the child with you. So we've done some evaluations with our families, and we always evaluate everything all the time. And every session we have evaluations, and over 90% have rated the pathways as very good or excellent. And we have over 90% that would definitely recommend this to others. What we often have families are saying is, why didn't I know about this before? So that's really encouraging. And again, that community that we build throughout by having the meal, by having childcare. Oftentimes we have to remind parents to pick up their kids at the end, because they're so engaged with other families that, you know, they finally find somebody that gets it and they want to talk to them about it. And session 8, you know, brings everything together, and we have a plan moving forward. So we're not just leaving them after 7 sessions. And like I said, the most important reason is to keep the pathways learning alive for our families. And so some of the stories we've heard is we've had the parents do that shift in thinking. They are now the shift in parenting. I'm always excited, especially for parents that have been parenting for a long time, to say, wow, I get this. This is different. I wish I had known it earlier. They no longer feel alone. They no longer feel overwhelmed. They now feel that they're supported, that they can do it. And by having that ongoing support in communities, it just is such a benefit for them. So sometimes in the groups, they're meeting face to face. Some now are meeting virtually. Some have Facebook groups. Even if they're just connected through an email, they're connected to a community of resources and information, which is really important, especially when you're looking for maybe some of those professionals that we need to work with us as well. And so my role as the parent liaison is to continue to support, to help in any way I can. And sometimes I'm even, for their meetings, I'm finding some professionals to come and speak at their groups about certain topics that they would like. And so these are just some of the comments that we've had from the families, because when they evaluated or they're telling us, I think for me, one of the best comments I had a family say that when she, for the first time, when she's talking about her family, she's seeing nods instead of people shaking their head. And I think that was a very strong comment. It's helped with our transition, and it's given us a support system to lean on. Sometimes parents, when they're coming to the training, they felt very overwhelmed because they feel that they're being judged by other people who aren't on this journey with them. And so when they hear people talking about it, it normalizes their experience for them too. And we always, always get this. We're not alone. We hear the words hope, the buckets, I need to fill the buckets. Those are just some of the comments that we're hearing. And so, as I spoke about a little bit earlier, we did an evaluation program with the University of Toronto, where we did a pre and post pathways evaluation with them. And then in Texas, they completed a 5-year evaluation program looking at the pathways program. And so here with the University of Toronto, it was a 3-year project, and they've even written a journal article about it that is to be published. And what we saw is families were saying, and based on the stats that we were getting back, is that they've seen a significant improvement in nurturing and attachment, in the family functioning, and in resilience. And then there was a borderline significant improvement in understanding childhood development and knowledge of parenting. And then Texas did the evaluation. They did it 6 months after pathways, and here are the results from that. The 89% had a better understanding of attachment. 87% had a better understanding of childhood development. 85% were more able to respond to their child's needs, which is huge. Significant increase in understanding of grief and loss, and significantly better than the control group. And so I think that's important, because we also see that in the pathways when we're delivering it, that they understand how grief and loss follows their child or youth throughout the whole life, and for us as parents as well too, and being able to recognize it and understand it as well. And then they saw a significant decrease in the child's tendency to internalize problems, such as depression, social withdrawal, anxiety, and somatic symptoms. And that pathways had a greater impact on child behavior for relative and kin families. And I think that video spoke to that kin family there as well. And then I love her story at the end, where she talks about when her granddaughter called her and she didn't even know she had left the house. I think that's a prime example where that grandparent was able to do the shift and to actually be able to respond to her granddaughter instead of react. Because when you react, I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And so this is just the evaluation results from Texas. It's here. It'll be in the handout if you would like it as well too. Again, highlighted there that pathways had a significant increase in their parenting. And this is where we've been to date as of 2020, where we've delivered the training. In some areas we've been twice. We've been to a couple places twice. But you see we've been to the Northwest, East, Central, and Toronto locations as well. And then this is where some of the support groups that we are supporting as of, again, 2020, where we've been able to build something. And I have to say, in every area we go to, the majority of the people want to stay connected somehow, whether it's by email, whether it's by a Facebook group, or by meeting. And sometimes groups might start with, well, we'll stay connected by email, and they will grow. And then the next time we'll go to that area and there's somebody will step up and say, okay, we'll do a Facebook group, and they offer other people to join as well too. But like I said, it's so important because you keep that pathways learning right there. Instead of going back to that traditional parenting, you're able to keep that therapeutic parenting alive. And so we do offer our pathway sessions in the fall, the winter, the spring, and we do a summer one as well. If you would like to register online, go on to our website, www.adoption.on.ca/events. There's also a survey if we haven't been to your area and you want us to come. We list where we're offering them, but you can also request us to come to your area. And we've had in a couple of areas, we've actually had parents organized from the venue to the participants, and so we will come there. We do have a limit of 20 parents per session, and that's because, you know, like I said, the curriculum is really full, and we want to make sure that everybody has the learning and able to share as well too. And we do now offer some virtual training as well in the Pathways sessions. So I, as a parent, cannot stress it enough. Every training I do, I learn something more, which just helps me to be a better parent for my kids. And now I'll pass it back to Kathy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I have to say the same thing. When I was first exposed to Pathways, when we were trained on it in 2015, I had been in my adoptive parenting journey for a lot of years too. And my kids were older, and yet it was just amazingly helpful in understanding what was kind of underlying some of the behavior, and just you know, just the way they thought about themselves and the world and adults and that kind of thing. So it was incredibly helpful well into our journey. And yes, I wish I could have taken it a long time ago, but it still helps regardless of the age of your kids. This stuff still can help really guide the way. Okay, so we're going to move to the next section of this webinar with an acknowledgement that, you know, parents can't do this alone, that they really do need that wraparound community-based support by the professionals in their world, and we want professionals who get it. So child welfare professionals who get it, mental health professionals, education system people, as well as justice system people. And so why we want this? We want this to kind of reduce the risk of disruptions once placements have happened. Judy Archer, who was at the ACO as our past manager for a number of years, did some research in this area. And when there are adequate post-placement supports and services available, it's a good thing, because we know that help seeking, so help seeking on the part of parents, has been correlated with positive self-esteem, good problem solving, and low defensiveness. That interventions provided by adoption competence supports and service providers are correlated with an increase in client satisfaction and better placement outcomes. And we also know that targeted subsidies help, and access to adoption-informed competent therapists also help. All of these things help potentially reduce the risk of placement disruption. As I talked about before, these were some of the stats coming out of our survey work and research work that we did a few years back. And so the stats are pretty significant. You know, large percentages of people, families thought their kids had mental health issues. Many believe they didn't get adequate professional services prior to being adopted. And though a number of people found it easy to get help, 70% are being put on wait lists. 53% had to change professionals at least once. 44% didn't believe their professional was adoption competent, whereas 87% believed it was very important that professionals were adoption competent. And 91% of both professionals and parents didn't think there were enough adoption competent professionals in Ontario at that time. So we began offering our ACT training program as well in 2015. We've done approximately 15 offerings to date and trained over 230 adoption professionals. ACT is not funded, and so I just need to say that up front, which is why we haven't been able to do nearly as many as with the Pathways. So it's something that we continue to look for funding on, and so if that's something that you think you can help us with, we'd love to hear from you. ACT as well has been very well received by participants. Over 90% of participants would recommend ACT to a colleague. Over 80% rated it as excellent or very good. And ACT itself, in terms of looking at what is evidence-based, it's rated level 4 promising practice under the QIC's intervention and program catalog, which is a really great start. There are very few curriculums out there that are evidence-based in this area, and so this is a really great start for a curriculum. If your people are interested in looking for our next ACT offering, they are also available on our events page. And we know that parents are looking for professionals who are permanency and adoption competent. And we actually include a search feature on our website so that parents and others can go and look for adoption, or can look for professionals who have completed the ACT training, and they can do a search on a region or whatever to find people that are. So the ACT curriculum, like Pathways, was developed by the Kinship Center. It is an 8-session curriculum as well, but it is double the length of Pathways. And so it's a 48-hour curriculum. And so in the past, when we were meeting face-to-face, it would be 8 full days. Over the past little while, during COVID, we've brought it to a virtual format, and we're doing it in 3-hour chunks of time. Still over, about, 2 months, but a little differently in a virtual format. It, like Pathways, is also, it's interactive, multimedia, there's videos, there's group exercises, we're doing more role plays, and there's a lot of opportunity to reflect on the concepts and how that impacts and integrates with your work. And there is reading and homework as well. There are some case studies, practice tools available, and lots of activities that are focused on the adult learner. What we have found is that there really is immediate applicability to promote permanency and reduce the risk of disruption for people working in this field. It provides professionals with the theory and the practice skills to help families who are parenting children and youth who've experienced trauma and loss. And it really helps professionals develop competence in building and enhancing services for parents, children, and youth, including assessments, planning, and therapeutic programs. It has the 8 sessions, as I mentioned, and it flows similarly to Pathways in that we spend time at the beginning talking about what is permanency, the core issues, the art and science of attachment, which includes the neurobiology piece as well, the developmental perspective of childhood development and the buckets. It then, for professionals, talks a lot about family constellation challenges. And so it goes into, some talk about siblings and original and birth families, openness, and the diversity of families as well. And then in terms of helping families with this new concept of being a healing parent as opposed to potentially a traditional parent, then it gets into how to support those permanency families, provide some tools for skilled practice, and then talks in the end a lot about diversity, healing, and the family, and ceremonies and rituals and that kind of thing. So it's quite an extensive, comprehensive curriculum that, like Pathways, really threads these pieces together. And so what we find is many professionals have taken aspects of these trainings, but this is a curriculum that brings them all together. And even really experienced professionals have found this to be an incredibly helpful curriculum when you're working with people on these journeys. So these are just some testimonials that we've received from ACT participants. And I think it's really helpful to, just take a moment to read through them. I mean, it's very thorough. It gives you tools, not just the training. I've been able to apply it immediately to my work. I now know where many clients are coming from. And this, this is just huge, I think. The one there at the bottom, you leave this course with a much more nuanced understanding of the unique challenges, which I think is really good. And you benefit immensely from the rich discussion from this learning with a cross-sectional professionals who are all invested in this. So some really great feedback from the professionals. Just some comments about our trainers, and the same trainers train ACT as well as Pathways. And so they really combine their knowledge and experiences to make for a rich learning environment. Many of our trainers have lived experience to share as well. They're engaging, they provide appropriate space and pace for participants, and the group size allows for more sharing and enriched learning experience. And we ask them as well, how will you apply what you've learned into practice? And so just some different comments here as to how they're using the tools, which I think really helps professionals figure out if this is something that works for them. And so here, I now have a good understanding of the issues that are underneath the problems that are encountered. And with more understanding, I can help them work through things, which is just so important. The tools are useful and duplicatable. Nice synthesis of a variety of materials and topics, nicely organized. And how is that different from other training programs that you've attended? So it's longer for sure, and more intensive and quite specialized. And that is really what, you know, we want professionals to understand, that this work is specialized. It's very interactive, which is nice too. And it specifically focuses on the adoption constellation and its members. It's really an important contribution and knowledge base for anyone working in human services who needs to understand this, because there are unique variables and there are unique dynamics that are involved as well. So just a couple more comments here. And the trainers are able to use the knowledge of participants to expand their curriculum, which we always find that the richness of the curriculum really comes through as part of the discussion that happens. So that is about ACT, and Sylvia did an awesome job of talking about pathways. So we do offer a few other things as well. We do offer a one-day workshop for professionals, and this is a great kind of introduction or lead in to the ACT training program. It's looking through an adoption and permanency lens. And so when we're able to meet in person, we can bring this anywhere in Ontario, but right now this is available virtually. And it's a really nice way of introducing this to a wide variety of cross-sector of professionals. We also have a workshop for educators. This was developed in the past couple of years in response to our parents who took Pathways and said, oh my goodness, I get this now, we're doing this at home, but please help me explain this to the school and the teachers, because you know, we're setting up this good stuff at home and then it's kind of falling apart at school when they're spending so many hours there. So we do have a workshop. It can be a half-day workshop or a full-day workshop. When we're meeting in person, we can go anywhere to do this, but right now it would be available virtually to anybody. And I know schools have a lot on their minds right now, of course, but later on in the year, potentially this might be something that's really good, because underlying this particular workshop, and it's not just for specific adoption related stuff, it really is looking at the impact of trauma and loss on learning. And so creating trauma sensitive schools is really what this workshop is all about, why that's of a benefit for everyone. About a year ago, we introduced a webinar series. And so this is, we now have over 10 live webinars that people can take part in. And there are a number of them available on demand, like this one is, so that you can watch them at your convenience. We also have some recordings that are available on demand. And these are recordings about, you know, some key things. Some of them are related to the COVID issues that have come up, and homeschooling, and back to school, and what, how has COVID impacted families on permanency journeys. And so it's really a wonderful overview, and we're going to try to keep adding to it. We are able to offer them for free right now. We won't always be able to unless we can get some funding for this. This isn't something, again, that's separately funded for. And so the more we are able to get funding for this, the more we can build this library of webinars. But they are available. This is what you can look for on actually the home page. You can click on it and get to the Adoption Matters webpage. We also offer education days from time to time, and we plan to keep that up. And those are for the whole constellation, anyone touched by adoption. And we do a variety of workshops, and we will continue to do that. And those are available for professionals as well as people living on these journeys. We're always available to do workshops for particular agencies or groups. They can be tailored to your needs. I mentioned the webinars. We can do lunch and learns. We also have spoken at lots of conferences and are always happy to do that as well. We really do want to spread the word that this is not only specialty parenting, but specialty professional work too. And the more we can get the word out there, the more families will be supported. So this really is our overall vision of this, where we see families at the center, and families need that support. And so the first line of support is the kind of training and education that we try to provide through Pathways. The second line of support is the support that we get from one another. So whether that be a parent support group that's getting support from one another, youth networks being developed. So youth have, you know, those connections to others that are on a similar path. We've had some new developments of adopted person networks in the province, which are wonderful for adult adoptees. And as well, trying to build birth parent or first and original family support, because they are a member of these constellations as well and need that support. And then buffering all of this is this idea of a wraparound of ACT trained professionals, so that when families or individuals do need that extra support, when they reach out to it, they get people who understand it and not people that are going to misunderstand it and provide advice that is not helpful and can be harmful. So that's our vision. And we like the way that we've named ourselves. It stands for Permanency and Adoption Competency Training, of course, but we also believe it's a pact, that we are in this together, that the ACO is in this together with kids and their families, with the child welfare and mental health and other communities. We want to make this work together. And so we're always happy to answer any questions that people have, take your suggestions for, you know, topics that you want to learn more about, ideas for better connecting within communities and virtually as well. So always happy to get your feedback. We're just going to show you a few little resources here that might be helpful. So if you want more information about the ACT and the Pathways curriculums, you can find it on our website at that link. You can find more information about the ACO's webinar series at the link on here, Adoption/Matters. And then if you actually want to register for something, all of those events are available on our events page in kind of date order. And so anything that's available is there. If you're looking for something and it's not on there, don't hesitate to email us and we'll let you know when the next offerings are going to be made available. Last year, for the Adoption Awareness Month of November, we always like to do something interesting during that month. And so last year we created some blogs, and it just talks a little bit more. We've covered some of it in the presentation today, but it just talks a little bit more in depth about some of the benefits and understanding that you can get from Pathways and ACT. So I would encourage you to have a look at those blogs as well. And this is a wonderful book that Sharon Kaplan-Rosia, so she was one of the original creators of ACT and Pathways, and then one of the other wonderful kinship curriculum writers and clinicians, Allison Davis-Maxon, wrote this book about a year ago. And it really fleshes out in a lot of ways the 7 core issues that are taught in ACT and Pathways, and it updates them for a much more diverse group of families and people. It's just a really lovely update. So I would encourage you to get that book. It is an expensive book, and so, you know, if you know someone that has it, maybe you can share it or get it through the library potentially. But it is a really wonderful book for both families and for professionals. So with that, Sylvia and I thank you very much for tuning into this. And if you do have any questions, that's our email, pact@adoptontario.ca. And we would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, give you more information, or take any feedback and suggestions that you have. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.